solutions engineer at Aembit, and I've spent about 10 years, almost my entire career, at Starbucks doing retail technology, security engineering, DevSecOps, and dealing with just insane scales of workload identity and access management. And so I have hit the bounds of what secrets managers are good at, and want to talk a little bit about my experiences here. So, potentially controversial opinion here. Credential rotation is not a strategy. It's a game of whack-a-mole that is never going to end. You've probably heard this 10 times this morning. You've got to find all of your credentials, you've got to find the places where people aren't rotating them, and you have to rotate them then. But you've already lost by the time that hits, because, a secret that ends up in GitHub is compromised and used within a minute of ending up in code. So if you're really just relying on rotating your credentials every 90 days, you've already lost. And so really, the strategy here is that we need to think about what we've done for humans. For a long time, everybody had different passwords for different services before we had single sign-on and before we had MFA and all of these other things. We need to start creating the equivalent for workloads and really leverage the open standards that are being developed by the community. And so, I talked about this a little bit. Identity is the perimeter for your humans already, right? You've got your Oktas, you've got your PAM solutions, your IGAs, things like that. And you're relying on identity every time your humans access anything. You're not treating this like a secrets management problem. But for workloads, it's all over the place, right? You might have an EC2 instance that's got a client ID and secret to access Azure, and an API key to get to Datadog, and a path to get to GitHub, and it's got all of these things just, sitting on the disk if you're lucky, or in the code if you're not. And so this is really where we need to start creating, this sort of single sign-on. But if you look at this slide, you can kind of see the challenges, right? There is no standardization in the workload world like we've got with humans. We've standardized around SAML and around OIDC. We've standardized around MFA. There are things that we built out for humans that just don't exist yet. So you've got services all over the place that need different kinds of credential to access different kinds of services, and some of those support modern authentication, and a lot of them don't. And so what Aembit does is we are Okta IAM for your workloads. So you can kind of think of us as that single sign-on layer for your workloads. We'll meet your workloads where they are and authenticate them based on their native platform identities, layer in some conditional access and other contextual-based checks, and then evaluate an access policy decision that gives them a credential to the service they need to access. So an example of this is you've got a Lambda function that's got an AWS IAM role attached to it, but that needs to go and get information out of an Azure storage account. And so instead of what you would normally do is put, an Azure client ID and secret, maybe in a secrets manager, an environment variable, and use that to log in, we use the IAM role identity. We take that STS token and we validate it, and then we exchange that for an Entra access token. And so we can provide federation in any environment that has any form of platform identity. And so you can use AWS auth anywhere outside of AWS. And so the way that we do this is with policy-based access. And so at the top, you've got your workloads here. They might be in AWS or Azure. They might be in SaaS services like GitLab or GitHub. And then at the bottom, you've got the services they're trying to access, right? And so we use what we call trust providers to attest and authenticate the workload. And then we'll do MFA checks. We can, do posture enforcement with CrowdStrike and Wiz, and then generate that dynamic, short-lived credential. And that way, there's no secret for you to rotate, right? We make a credential just in time, and that expires 5 minutes later, 15 minutes later, however long you want that to live. And so that gets you out of the business of rotating these static credentials in this messy world that we've been living in where authentication's all over the place. And so here's an example. One of our customers is Snowflake, and they use Snowflake internally for a lot of things. And so in their CI/CD pipelines, in their Kubernetes environments, and all of their workloads, they're using Snowflake as a central data source for a lot of their internal applications. They had usernames and passwords. They had thousands of these things, and what we can do is replace those passwords with short-lived jobs. And so what they went from was, instead of rotating thousands of passwords every 90 days, they actually just set up a trust relationship and monitor and audit. Saves them 10 hours a day on average that they spent managing their credentials, and that's not even including when there's actually an incident you have to respond to, right? When you've got that breach and you've got to go and rotate all your credentials, or you found something that ended up in GitHub, a lot of times that takes people 40 hours plus to go and clean all of that up, distribute the new secret to all the places it needs to be in, and get this all cleaned up. And so what we did for Snowflake was we got those static secrets out of their pipelines, out of their workloads, and replaced those passwords with federation. One of the other interesting benefits that they had from this was that almost half of their auditing and compliance burden was eliminated, because they now had a centralized directory where they could see all of their workloads, all of the services their workloads had access to, and every event where that access was used.
Aembit. Manage access, not secrets.